All right, so are you ready to dive deep?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
We're tackling Sun Tzu's Art of War today,
Awesome.
which, it's one of those books everyone's heard of.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people kind of write it off as like, oh, ancient military tactics.
Right.
What do they have to do with me today?
Exactly.
But we've got the full audiobook. We're going to really dig in, and I think people will be surprised
Yeah, I think so too.
that this is so relevant.
To me, the art of war, it's almost like this guide to understanding human nature and conflict. Like it reveals these timeless patterns that still play out,
That's a great point.
even in our modern world.
Right,
So yeah, the language might sound a little old-fashioned,
right.
but the insights, they're shockingly relevant.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to really try to do in this deep dive.
Right.
Is to not get bogged down in like going chapter by chapter, page by page, and more like pull out
Yes.
those golden nuggets.
The aha moments.
Yeah, like how can we actually apply this wisdom to our lives today?
Exactly.
So, all right, Sun Tzu kicks things off right away in the first chapter,
Okay.
laying plans.
Yeah.
And he lays out these 5 crucial factors. And these aren't what you'd expect, from a military text.
It's true. It's true. He talks about moral law,
Okay.
heaven, earth, commander, and then method and discipline.
All right, so let's break these down because those sound,
They sound a little abstract, I know.
yeah, a little abstract.
But if you think of moral law
Mhm.
as like that shared purpose and values within a team,
Mm-hmm.
when everyone's aligned, you've got that energy like we're in this together.
So it's like that team vibe.
Exactly. Yeah, that team vibe.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about heaven and earth? Are we getting all like astrological here or?
Uh-huh. No, not quite.
Okay.
Heaven, to Sun Tzu, it refers to those external factors that are outside of your control.
Right.
Good. So think market trends, a sudden pandemic, maybe,
Yeah.
even just the actual weather, if you want to think of it literally.
So it's the big picture stuff.
The big
Yeah.
picture stuff that you can't control.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then Earth, on the other hand, that's your specific situation, your industry, your
Yeah.
competitive landscape,
Okay.
the resources that you have.
So heaven's the big picture. Earth is your own personal playing field.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay. What about the commander? Is that where leadership comes in?
Yes, absolutely. So the commander represents you, the leader, the decision maker, and Sun Tzu is very specific about the qualities that make a strong commander.
Okay.
So wisdom, sincerity,
Okay.
benevolence.
Benevolence.
Yes.
That's not what I was expecting from, a military leader.
Well, and that's what's so amazing about Sun Tzu is that
Yeah.
he understood leadership. It's not just about brute force, but it's inspiring loyalty,
Yeah.
trust, a willingness to follow. So benevolence creates a sense of unity,
Right.
but then he balances it with courage
Right.
and strictness.
So there's a balance there.
Yes, it's a delicate balance.
Okay.
You can't be all warm and fuzzy, but you can't be a tyrant either.
Right.
It's finding that line.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the last factor, method and discipline?
Well, this is all about having clear processes, right?
Mhm.
Structure, efficient use of resources.
Mm-hmm.
Sun Tzu even talks about controlling military expenditure. I mean, it's
Mhm.
basically budgeting, but for warfare.
That's a concept that, never goes out of style.
Right, exactly. Okay.
It all comes back to that.
So you got these 5 factors to consider, but then how do you know if you're on the right track? How do you know if you're going to be successful?
Well, Sun Tzu doesn't leave us hanging, right?
He doesn't.
He actually gives us 7 specific questions
Okay.
to ask yourself.
Assess the situation.
Yes, okay.
And this is where it gets interesting because these questions, they're not just for military leaders. These are for anyone facing a challenge, right?
Mhm.
So he asks, which ruler is more in tune with the moral law? Which general is more capable? What advantages are offered by heaven and earth? Which side has better discipline? Which army is stronger? Which side has better trained officers and men? And finally, on which side is there greater consistency in reward and punishment?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
But it sounds like it's not just about having the bigger army or more resources.
It's not. It's not at all. It's really about having that alignment of purpose,
Okay.
the right leadership, understanding the circumstances, really knowing the terrain that you're on, so to speak.
The earth, so to speak.
The earth, exactly.
So how could someone apply this to their own life?
Well, let's say you're leading a team at work.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you all on the same page about your goals? Do you have the right skills and resources? Are you adapting to changes in the market? These are all questions, inspired by Sun Tzu that can help you assess, really, your chances of success.
And a checklist.
It is. It's a checklist.
Yeah. Okay, so laying plans chapter, we've got a good foundation. Now it's time to get into the actual waging war,
Right.
which is chapter 2.
Yes.
But according to Sun Tzu, waging war is not always what you might expect.
No, not at all.
In fact, one of his most surprising pieces of advice is to avoid prolonged conflict at all costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And he has this really practical example to illustrate the point. He talks about how much it actually costs to maintain a large army.
Okay.
1,000 ounces of silver per day.
1,000 ounces of silver a day.
I know. Even for a wealthy state, that's a significant drain on your resources.
That's a lot of avocado toast.
It is a lot of avocado toast, that's true.
But it really highlights that time is a crucial factor
Yes,
in
absolutely.
any kind of conflict.
It is.
The longer it drags on,
Yes.
the more it costs you. And not just financially.
That's right. Morale, energy, your momentum, it can really take a toll.
And this is where his concept of foraging on the enemy comes in. Now, we're obviously not talking about, literally going and raiding for food in a modern context.
No.
But how does that principle apply today?
Well, think about it this way. Can you gain resources, momentum, even support from your actions along the way? It's turning your opponent's moves, even their mistakes, to your advantage.
Okay.
So it's about being adaptable and resourceful.
So how would that work? Let's say in a business negotiation.
Sure. Think about it. You might concede on a minor point to gain leverage on something much more important, or you could use their own arguments against them, subtly kind of shifting that power dynamic in your favor.
Oh, so it's like a jujitsu move.
It is. It's like jujitsu.
Yeah.
Using their force against them.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of clever tactics, let's move on to chapter 3, attack by stratagem,
Okay.
which is where that very famous Sun Tzu quote comes in.
Mm-hmm.
All warfare is based on deception.
Yes. But before we jump into the deception part, it's important to understand that Sun Tzu, he's not advocating for dishonesty, right?
Sure.
He's talking about being adaptable, unpredictable,
Okay.
using your opponent's expectations against them.
Well, it's more about outsmarting them than tricking them.
Yes, exactly. It's about understanding their motivations, anticipating their moves, and then creating a situation where they almost defeat themselves.
Okay.
It's winning without fighting.
How do we win without fighting in our everyday lives?
Well, think about a tough negotiation, right? Could you win by getting the other party to see things from your perspective without them feeling like they've lost?
Oh.
Or maybe you're working on a creative project. Could you win by coming up with a solution that's so innovative, so unexpected,
Right.
that it completely changes the game?
So it's a different way of looking at conflict. It's not about brute force. It's almost about psychology
It is, yeah.
and strategy.
It's about understanding the human element, and that's really what makes Sun Tzu so brilliant.
Okay.
He understood that the battlefield, it's not just about physical terrain. It's about the minds of the people involved.
Speaking of terrain, Sun Tzu's next chapters, tactical dispositions
Yes.
and energy, they really dive into those specifics of how to position yourself
Right.
for success.
Yes.
And he uses these great analogies.
He does.
One that stood out to me was he uses this image of a grindstone
Yeah.
being hurled at an egg.
Yes.
It's such a powerful image
It is.
to really capture this idea of strategy and leverage.
Right.
So it's not always about brute force, but it's about finding those weak points,
Yes.
exploiting vulnerabilities, striking at the right moment.
Yes.
And it really highlights that you don't always need brute force to win.
You don't. The egg can win if it knows how to use its advantages.
Even the egg.
Even the egg, exactly.
So think about a time when you felt outmatched.
Yeah.
Maybe you're up against a competitor with more resources or a challenge that just feels impossible.
Right.
Sun Tzu's advice is to find that weak spot, that point of leverage where you can really maximize your strengths.
Exactly.
So instead of going head to head, you're finding a way to outmaneuver.
Yes, exactly. It's about being strategic, not just strong. And that applies, to business deals, to personal relationships, to any kind of conflict you might face.
It's all about knowing where to hit.
It is. It's all about precision and strategy.
But he doesn't just talk about physical energy, right? He talks about this idea of combined energy.
Yes.
What's that all about?
Well, that's where teamwork comes in.
Okay.
Combined energy is that collective force that emerges when you have individuals working together in harmony.
Okay.
aligning their strengths
Yeah.
towards a shared goal.
So it's like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly, exactly. Sun Tzu understood that, even if you're strong individually, you can achieve so much more when you work together strategically.
That makes sense.
So think about the teams you're a part of, at work, in your community, your family even.
Right.
How can you harness that combined energy to achieve those shared goals?
So it's about surrounding yourself with the right people
It is.
who complement your skills,
Yeah.
share your vision.
Exactly. And creating an environment where everyone feels empowered to contribute their best. That's how you unlock that combined energy that Sun Tzu is talking about.
Okay, so we've got moral law, heaven and earth, commander, method and discipline, combined energy. That's a lot.
It is.
There's one more crucial element, though, that really weaves its way through the entire art of war.
Right.
And that's this importance of knowing yourself
Yes.
and your enemy.
And your enemy, yes.
Yeah.
Which is where self-awareness meets strategic thinking. You need to be honest about your own strengths and weaknesses,
Okay.
but also be able to analyze your opponents, your situations, vulnerabilities, and advantages.
It's like that quote, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. It's about preparation, research, having that really clear understanding of the playing field, whether it's literal or metaphorical.
Yes, and think about how this applies to your own life. Whether you're leading a team,
Right.
making a big life decision,
Yeah.
or even just navigating like a tricky conversation.
Right.
The more you know about yourself
Mm-hmm.
and the situation that you're in, the better equipped you are to make those strategic choices.
Okay, so knowing yourself and your enemy is key. But what happens when the situation changes, when the battlefield shifts beneath your feet? That's where adaptability comes in, right?
Yes, absolutely. He introduces this concept in chapters 7 and 8, maneuvering and variation in tactics.
Okay.
And he compares a skilled strategist to water, flowing around obstacles, finding the path of least resistance. It's a beautiful metaphor for how we need to be flexible
Yeah.
and adjust our approach
Yeah.
based on the circumstances.
Yeah, that be like water advice.
Yes.
It's so relevant today, especially in a world that's constantly changing.
It is. It is. You can't be rigid
Yeah.
in your thinking, right?
Yeah.
You've got to be able to read the signals,
Yeah.
adjust your course,
Yeah.
even pivot completely if you have to.
So how do we become more water-like?
Well, it's about being open to new information, being willing to learn from mistakes,
Okay.
and being able to adapt your plans as things evolve.
So it's not about being passive, it's about being responsive.
Responsive, yes.
Yeah.
Being able to flow with the current, but
Mhm.
still steering towards your goal.
So find that balance between vision and flexibility.
Exactly, exactly.
I'm thinking about all those times where like we get stuck in our own heads, clinging to a plan that's clearly not working anymore.
Right.
Sun Tzu would probably be like, let go, man. Just go with the flow.
Yeah, loosen your grip
Loosen your grip.
and see where the current takes you. Maybe use your spies.
Oh, use your spies.
Ah.
Okay, so that's one of the most intriguing chapters. Chapter 13,
Yes.
the use of spies.
Yes. This is a fun one.
This does sound like a spy thriller. So he lays out these 5 types of spies: local, inward, converted, doomed, and surviving, each playing a different role in gathering intelligence.
Right, right. And he calls this divine manipulation of the threads.
Divine manipulation of the threads.
I know, it sounds so dramatic, right?
It does.
It's about information control, using spies to gather intelligence,
Yeah.
but also to spread disinformation.
Hold on. Disinformation. That sounds a little ethically questionable.
Well, remember, we are talking about warfare here.
Right.
But if we translate that to the modern world,
Right.
it's not about espionage in the literal sense. It's about the importance of information gathering,
Okay.
research,
Yeah.
due diligence before making decisions. We need to be our own spies in a way,
Yeah.
constantly learning, observing, understanding the landscape before we take action.
So it's about being informed,
Yeah.
doing your research,
Abs-
understanding the situation before you just jump in.
Yes. Think about it in your work, your personal life.
Yeah.
Are you actively seeking out information? Are you analyzing situations carefully before you make those decisions?
I'm realizing how often we make decisions based on assumptions or like incomplete information. We need to be more proactive
Yes. Yes.
in gathering that intel.
Be proactive. Just like Sun Tzu spies.
Just like Sun Tzu spies. And it's not just about gathering the information, right? It's about being discerning,
Exactly.
knowing how to separate fact from fiction.
Yes.
And understanding the motivations behind the information.
Absolutely. Being able to read between the lines, so to speak.
Wow, so we've covered a lot of ground here, laying plans to the use of spies. It's clear that the art of war is so much more than just this, military guidebook. It's a guide to strategic thinking, leadership, and just, navigating the challenges of life.
Absolutely. And, as we go deeper, we'll uncover even more timeless wisdom from Sun Tzu.
Yeah.
Insights that can help you achieve your goals, navigate these complex situations,
Okay.
and ultimately become a more strategic and effective decision maker. So buckle up. There's more to come.
Yeah, this is already blowing my mind. I can't wait to see what other strategic gems
Yes.
we uncover in the next part of our deep dive
Exactly.
into the art of war.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing that really struck me going back through the art of war is how Sun Tzu keeps bringing us back to this idea of choosing your battles.
Oh, yeah.
Like we talked about avoiding those prolonged conflicts. But he really gets into it in Chapter 2, Waging War.
Yeah, what'd he say?
He says, when your weapons are dulled, your ardor dampened, your strength exhausted, and your treasure spent, other chieftains will spring up to take advantage of your extremity.
Oh, that's a chilling thought.
I know, it's like he's predicting those opportunistic rivals just waiting to swoop in.
Like vultures.
Exactly, when you're at your weakest point.
And that makes you think, in any conflict, business, personal, even military, if you let it drag on too long, you're setting yourself up for disaster.
It really is a recipe for disaster.
Because it's not just the resources you're spending, right?
It's the momentum.
It's your morale.
Your strategic position, it all takes a hit.
So how do you know when to disengage? When is it time to cut your losses and walk away?
Well, Sun Tzu gives us some clues in Chapter 4, Tactical Dispositions. He says it's crucial to recognize when you're outmatched.
Okay.
And to know when to retreat strategically.
Retreat strategically? That sounds almost like giving up.
Not necessarily.
Of course.
Sun Tzu actually sees retreat as a maneuver.
Okay.
A chance to regroup, reassess, maybe even turn the tables.
So it's not about weakness, it's about repositioning.
Exactly. Finding a more advantageous position.
Finding a better battlefield.
Yeah, and he even says in Chapter 7, Maneuvering, appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend, march swiftly to places where you are not expected.
Ooh, that's sneaky.
Right. It's about being unpredictable, keeping your opponent off balance.
Gotcha.
And he even suggests using deception to lure your enemy into a bad spot.
Oh, like how...
He says, if you are anxious to fight, you should not go to meet the invader near a river which he has to cross.
So you're using the environment to your advantage.
Exactly.
Okay, but this environment we're talking about, it's not always just physical terrain, right?
It's also about understanding the climate of the situation.
Climate.
Yeah, the mood, the relationships, the power dynamics, all that.
So it's like reading the room, but on a strategic level?
Exactly. And being able to adapt to that landscape is key.
So how do we do that? How do we become more adaptable?
Well, Sun Tzu talks about this in Chapter 8, Variation in Tactics. He says, the general who thoroughly understands the advantages that accompany variation of tactics knows how to handle his troops.
So flexibility is key.
Exactly. You can't be rigid, especially in today's world where things are constantly changing.
Yeah, you got to be able to pivot.
Adjust your strategy, maybe even throw out the whole plan and start over.
Wow.
And this is where Sun Tzu's emphasis on observation comes in. Not just knowing yourself and your enemy, but understanding that bigger context.
The heaven and earth stuff.
Yes, exactly. It's like having your finger on the pulse, noticing those subtle shifts that might impact your strategy.
That's a good way to put it.
And he warns against being swayed by emotions, too.
Oh, yeah. What do you say about that?
In Chapter 12, The Attack by Fire, he says, no ruler should put troops into the field merely to gratify his own spleen. No general should fight a battle simply out of pique.
Ooh, that's good.
Right. Stay calm, think strategically, don't let your emotions lead you into a bad decision.
Makes sense. So you're saying keep a cool head.
Exactly. He even suggests that you can use deception to manipulate your opponent's emotions.
Oh, how's that work?
He says, hold out baits to entice the enemy, feign disorder, and crush him.
So it's like psychological warfare?
It is. And, this psychological aspect of the art of war is incredibly relevant today.
To everyday life?
Yeah, to leadership, negotiation, even just interacting with people.
I'm starting to see that.
And this leads us to one of Sun Tzu's most interesting and maybe controversial ideas.
Okay, lay on me.
In Chapter 9, The Army on the March, he says, a skilled general should mystify his officers and men by false reports and appearances, and thus keep them in total ignorance.
Wait, so he's saying you should keep your own team in the dark.
It's not about being manipulative or dishonest. It's more about recognizing that sometimes revealing too much information can backfire.
So in some situations, less is more.
Exactly. And think about it. In business negotiations, legal battles, even personal disagreements, revealing your whole strategy up front can weaken your position.
Makes sense.
It's about knowing when to hold back, when to reveal just enough to achieve your goal.
Like a poker face.
Yes.
Hmm.
And this brings us back to the importance of spies, or in a modern context, information gathering.
Ah, chapter 13.
Yes. Sun Tzu dedicated a whole chapter to this, emphasizing that knowledge of the enemy's dispositions can only be obtained from other men.
But he's not talking about just like sneaking around and stealing secrets.
No, it's about actively seeking out information, using all the resources you have to understand your opponent, their strengths, weaknesses, intentions, everything.
It's like being a detective.
Exactly. Gathering clues and piecing together the puzzle of their strategy.
Okay, so we've got deception, information gathering. What else is central to Sun Tzu's philosophy?
Strategic decision-making.
Okay.
He's always emphasizing planning, calculation, anticipating your opponent's moves.
Be proactive.
Yes. Always be thinking ahead, have a plan before you even enter the battlefield.
And that reminds me of another one of his awesome analogies from chapter 5, energy.
Which one?
The grindstone and the egg.
Ah, yes. A grindstone dashed against an egg.
Such a weird but powerful image.
It is, because you wouldn't think the egg would stand a chance.
No way.
But Sun Tzu's point is that it's not always about brute force, it's about leverage.
Timing.
Focusing your energy on the weak spots.
So even the underdog can win if they're strategic.
Exactly. Like David and Goliath, taking down a giant with one well-placed stone.
Yeah. And that applies to so many areas of life.
It does. It's a metaphor for overcoming any challenge that seems impossible.
You just got to find that vulnerability.
And strike at the right moment.
With precision and focus.
Exactly.
I think we get so caught up in trying to match strength for strength.
We do.
When
yeah.
sometimes a smarter approach is better.
Absolutely. Work smarter, not harder.
And this idea of focused energy also applies to teamwork.
Yes.
Remember, combined energy.
Sun Tzu talks about how a group working together can achieve so much more than individuals on their own.
We touched on this earlier, but it's so important.
It is. He says, the host, thus forming a single united body, it is impossible either for the brave to advance alone or for the cowardly to retreat alone.
So even if you feel like you're up against a giant grindstone,
You can find a way to crack it if you work together strategically.
and that collaborative spirit is essential for anything that requires teamwork.
Absolutely. Business, community projects, even families.
It all comes down to building strong relationships.
Open communication.
A sense of shared purpose.
Exactly. Create a culture where everyone feels valued and empowered to contribute.
So much wisdom in the art of war.
There is. And as we continue to explore it, we'll see how these principles apply to achieving success in all areas of life.
It's amazing how Sun Tzu's thinking still feels so fresh, even after all these centuries.
I know, right? Like, it's not just some dusty old book.
Not at all. His advice is surprisingly practical, even for today's world.
Yeah. Take what he says in chapter 6, weak points and strong.
Hmm.
He's got this great line about choosing your battles.
Oh yeah, what's that one?
He says, if we wish to fight, the enemy can be forced to an engagement even though he be sheltered behind a high rampart and a deep ditch. All we need do is attack some other place that he will be obliged to relieve.
Ooh, I see what he's getting at there.
Right, it's like finding that indirect approach.
Yeah, don't go for the obvious target. Find a way to outmaneuver.
And this applies to so much more than just warfare.
Absolutely. Think about a tough negotiation. Sometimes the way to break through that deadlock is to shift the focus. Find some common ground somewhere else.
Exactly. Or even just address, like, the emotional needs of the other person.
It's like creating a back door to get to your goal.
I like that. A back door.
Yeah, you're not going in head on. You're finding a more creative, more strategic path.
And that brings us back to one of Sun Tzu's big themes, adaptability.
Oh yeah, be like water.
Exactly. He talks about this a lot in chapter 8, variation in tactics.
Yeah.
He says, let your rapidity be that of the wind, your compactness that of the forest.
That's such a cool image.
Right. You're this force of nature, swift and powerful.
But also adaptable, able to adjust to the situation.
And he uses this other contrast too, like fire when you're attacking, then immovable as a mountain when defending.
So know when to strike and when to hold your ground.
Exactly. Read the situation, Adjust your approach.
That's a crucial skill for leaders, too.
It is. Knowing when to push and when to pull back, when to inspire, and when to make those tough calls.
It's all about knowing yourself.
Right. And this is where that self-awareness piece comes in. If you don't know your own strengths and weaknesses, how can you make the right decisions?
So true. Okay, so we've talked about so much planning, deception, adaptability, knowing yourself. If we had to boil down the art of war to one big takeaway,
What would it be?
yeah, like what's the essence of Sun Tzu's wisdom?
For me, it's the power of strategic thinking. Approaching every challenge with a clear goal, a plan, and the willingness to adapt along the way.
So it's not just about winning battles, it's about winning in life.
Exactly. And Sun Tzu's principles work because they're based on human nature, on those timeless patterns of conflict and cooperation.
It's about seeing the bigger picture, making smart decisions, taking calculated risks.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious,
Yeah.
what resonated most with you? What strategies are you going to try out in your own life?
Ooh, that's a good question to think about. And remember, this is just a glimpse into Sun Tzu's brilliance.
Right, we just scratched the surface.
If you want to go deeper, check out the full audiobook.
It's full of wisdom that you could apply to your own challenges.
So thanks for joining us on this epic journey into the art of war.
We hope you've learned some valuable strategies.
Maybe even discovered your inner strategists along the way.
And until next time, happy strategizing.
See you later.